The winter that year had been unusually harsh, stretching longer and colder than anyone could remember. A thick blanket of snow covered the woods and fields, turning the once lively landscape into a quiet, frozen world. Trees stood bare and still, their branches coated with frost, creaking softly whenever the cold wind passed through. The rivers had slowed, their edges turning to ice, and the soft rustling of leaves had been replaced by a deep, echoing silence. Most of the animals had prepared well in advance for such a season. The squirrels had gathered nuts and disappeared into their cozy nests. The badgers and hedgehogs had tucked themselves deep into their burrows, fast asleep, waiting for the warmth of spring. Birds like swifts and swallows had long since flown away to distant lands where the sun still shone warmly. Even the smallest creatures, slugs, snails, and insects, had hidden themselves in safe, dark corners to survive the bitter cold. The forest, once full of life and sound, now felt empty and still, as though it were holding its breath. But not every creature had escaped the hardship of winter. High above the silent fields, a lone crow struggled against the cold wind. Her feathers, though thick and black, could not fully protect her from the biting chill. She had been flying since morning, searching desperately for something, anything, to eat. She scanned the snow-covered ground carefully, looking for movement, for a sign of life, for even the smallest opportunity. But everywhere she looked, there was nothing but white emptiness. The usual places where she once found scraps of food were now barren. The fields offered no grain, the roads had no leftovers, and even the forest seemed to have hidden all its secrets beneath the snow. As the hours passed, her wings grew tired, her movements slower, and her hope began to fade. By late afternoon, the sky had turned a pale gray, and the light was beginning to dim. The crow's stomach ached with hunger, and she could feel her strength slipping away. She let out a soft, tired caw, her voice echoing faintly in the stillness around her. "I will have to go without dinner tonight," she thought sadly. The idea of facing another cold night without food filled her with dread. She had already gone too long without eating, and she knew that if she did not find something soon, it would only get harder to survive. Her wings beat slowly as she considered turning back to the shelter of her usual resting place. Perhaps it was better to save what little energy she had left rather than continue a hopeless search. Just as she began to turn away, something caught her eye in the distance. At first, it was barely noticeable, a thin, curling line rising into the sky. She paused mid-flight, narrowing her eyes to focus. It was smoke, a faint but steady column of smoke drifting upward into the cold air. Instantly, a spark of hope ignited within her. Smoke means fire, she thought, her mind racing. And fire means cooking, and cooking means food. The thought alone was enough to give her new energy. With a determined flap of her wings, she changed direction and flew toward the distant smoke, her heart beating faster with anticipation. As she drew closer, the outline of a farmhouse came into view, standing alone at the edge of the snowy fields. Warm light glowed from its windows, a comforting contrast to the cold world outside. The smell of food drifted faintly through the air, carried by the breeze, and the crow felt her hunger intensify. Circling quietly above, she looked for an opportunity. Inside the house, a farmer's wife was busy preparing dinner. A large pot of stew bubbled gently over the fire, filling the room with a rich and savory aroma. Freshly baked bread rested on the table, its golden crust still warm. On the windowsill, Placed there to keep cool in the winter air, lay a piece of cheese and a pat of butter. The crow's sharp eyes locked onto the cheese immediately. It looked fresh, soft, and perfect, exactly what she needed. She waited for the right moment, watching carefully to make sure no one was looking. The farmer's wife had her back turned, focused on stirring the stew. Without hesitation, the crow swooped down swiftly and silently. In one smooth motion, she grabbed the cheese in her beak and flapped her wings hard, lifting herself back into the air before anyone could notice. Her heart raced as she flew away, but as the farmhouse grew smaller behind her, a sense of triumph filled her. She had done it. She had found food. Relieved and pleased with herself, the crow searched for a safe place to enjoy her meal. Soon, she found a tall tree nearby, its branches bare but sturdy. She perched high above the ground, far from danger, holding the cheese securely in her beak. The cold no longer seemed so harsh, and the silence of the forest no longer felt so empty. All that mattered now was the delicious meal she was about to enjoy. She shifted comfortably on the branch, preparing to eat. Unbeknownst to her, she was not alone. Hidden among the bushes below, a fox lay watching. He too had been struggling through the long, unforgiving day, searching for food without success. Hunger gnawed at him, weakening his body and dulling his energy. He had been just moments away from giving up when he noticed the crow above him. At first, he saw only her dark shape against the pale sky. But then, as he looked closer, he saw the piece of cheese in her beak. His eyes lit up instantly. What a fine piece of cheese, he thought, his mouth watering. The sight of it awakened his hunger even more. He knew he could not climb the tree or chase the crow in the air. But the fox was not known for strength alone, he was known for his cleverness. And as he watched the crow, an idea began to form in his mind. A slow, sly smile spread across his face. I may not be able to take it by force, he thought, but perhaps I can take it by trickery. Rising from his hiding place, the fox walked calmly toward the base of the tree. He made sure his movements were gentle and non-threatening. Looking up at the crow, he called out in a smooth, friendly voice, "Good evening, Mrs. Crow. You look absolutely wonderful today." The crow looked down, surprised. No one had ever spoken to her in such a polite and admiring way before. She tilted her head slightly, curious but cautious. The fox continued, his voice full of warmth and admiration. "Oh, Mrs. Crow, your feathers are truly magnificent, so black, so glossy, and so beautifully smooth. I have never seen anything like them." The crow felt a small flutter of pride. She had always known her feathers were nice, but hearing someone else say it made her feel special. She lifted her head a little higher, allowing the light to catch her feathers just right. The fox noticed this and smiled to himself, knowing his plan was working. "And your grace," he went on, "the way you fly, so elegant and effortless. You soar higher than any bird I have ever seen, even higher than the mighty eagle." Now the crow was fully pleased. She puffed out her chest proudly and shifted on the branch, showing off her wings slightly. The fox's words filled her with confidence. She began to believe every compliment he gave. The fox continued his flattery, praising her strength, her beauty, and her elegance. Each word was carefully chosen, each compliment designed to make the crow feel more important, more admired, and more eager to impress. Finally, after a pause, the fox looked up at her thoughtfully and said, "But, dear Mrs. Crow, there is one thing I have not yet experienced, your voice. The crow froze for a moment. Her voice. Other birds had often laughed at her harsh caw. But the fox's tone was so sincere, so convincing. I am certain, he continued, that your voice must be as beautiful as the rest of you. Perhaps even the sweetest voice in the entire forest. Would you do me the honor of singing for me? The crow hesitated, but only for a moment. The desire to prove herself, to live up to the fox's praise, was too strong. She believed him completely. Taking a deep breath, she prepared to sing. She opened her beak wide and let out a loud, proud caw. In that very instant, the cheese slipped from her beak and fell straight down. The fox was ready. He leapt forward and caught it effortlessly, snapping it up before it even touched the ground. Without wasting a second, he swallowed it whole. Looking up at the stunned crow, the fox laughed softly. "Thank you, Mrs. Crow," he said. "And remember, next time, be careful of those who flatter you." With that, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the forest. The crow sat in silence, her pride shattered and her stomach still empty. She realized, too late, that she had been tricked, not by force, but by her own vanity. The cold wind blew once again through the trees as she ruffled her feathers sadly. That night, she went to sleep hungry, but wiser than before, carrying with her a lesson she would never forget. Never trust those who praise you too easily, and never let pride cloud your judgment.